Hello, and welcome to the Pandemic People Podcast. I'm your host, David Roman, and this is episode 4. Now, if you checked out our last episode, you'll remember that we were talking about a food drive down in Huanchaco, Peru. I wanted to highlight one very specific method to donate to this food drive. There's an amazing photographer named Henry Recinos who is selling photography prints online. When you purchase these, 100% of the proceeds go towards the Huanchaco food drive. If you have some money to spare, or you really just want some amazing photography on your walls, the website is in the description of the podcast, and for those of you on YouTube, the link is down below. Check out the link and donate if you can. For today's episode, we head down to Texas, USA to talk to a political science major about pandemic life as a student in the Lone Star State. The USA, as of today's episode, has over 1 million confirmed coronavirus cases, which is nearly 1/3 of the entire world's case count. They have now officially lost more people to coronavirus than soldiers in the Vietnam War. Despite this, many states are already planning to reopen their economies. Texas is one such state. This reality is coupled with the fact that there are growing protests across the country, in which people are defying social distance measures and demanding to end the lockdowns. In contrast to this, thankfully, the majority of the world's population is continuing to practice social distancing. What this typically means for things like education is classes are being delivered using virtual platforms such as Zoom or Google Classroom. Long-distance learning was already a widespread idea before the pandemic. Many schools offer online credits or supplement classes through online content. Therefore, the infrastructure for virtual learning is already fairly advanced. Now, as a parent, I'm probably not alone in saying that having a kid studying at home all day hasn't been the easiest transition to manage. There are definitely pros and cons to online schooling, and everyone has their own individual learning style. However, having the ability to continue studies during a pandemic is something I'm sure many students are very happy about. My next guest is one such student. He's currently at the end stages of his master's degree and is already taking the next steps to obtain his doctorate. So without waiting any longer, let's grab our masks, pack our virtual bags, and fly down to Texas. Well, hello and welcome back to the show. I'm sitting here with Jefferson Stillflex, all the way down in Texas. Tell me a little bit about yourself, Jefferson. I don't know. I know you're in the Dallas area, but whereabouts are you living?
Well, specifically, I was born in Dallas, and I spent half of my life in Grand Prairie, and I'm currently a graduate assistant I'm actually a graduate and a teaching assistant at Midwestern State University in Wichita Falls. So I am currently living in Wichita Falls right now.
Okay.
And I just recently got accepted into a PhD program in the University of North Texas, which is in
Awesome.
Denton. So I will most likely be moving to Denton real soon.
Okay.
So I'll be going back to the North Texas Metroplex.
Okay. Now, obviously, I'm not super familiar with the geography of Texas, but I guess where are you right now in relation to Dallas then? Like whereabouts, like what direction would you be?
Well, in relation to Dallas right now, I'm currently in Grand Prairie.
Oh, okay.
Well, technically, I'm physically in Wichita Falls, but my address, I'm currently living in Grand Prairie when I go back to the Metroplex.
Okay. And you said you were born in Dallas, so have you lived in Texas your whole life, kind of thing, or?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Tell me a little bit about your family. Like who's all down there? Are you living on your own or?
Well, my entire family lives in the Dallas area, and also my distant family lives in East Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And the only people that live in Wichita Falls right now are me, my grandmother, as well as my uncle and his family.
Okay.
So it's kind of like a very knit family, and we tend to be kind of stationary. So it's been historically, we've always lived in Texas our lives, and very few actually moved outside the state, never mind the country.
That's interesting. Yeah, because I think about my own family, and we're Chilean, so I mean my family already relocated to Canada once, and there's very few of us here. But then everybody branched out. It's so bizarre, like my sister's in Toronto, my brother's in Calgary, my niece is in Calgary. A couple of us are here in Regina. It's like our family. It seems like the way of things now is just everybody just takes off, and nobody stays around. So that's kind of neat that you're actually all in the same area still. Hey,
that's quite common in Texas because normally there's like there was a recent study. I can't remember exactly what it was, but the states that were like, there's like individuals in states that are more likely to leave. Among these states include like California, as well as the Midwest and the Northeastern states like New York and Michigan. However, the people in the states that are more likely to stay in the states even through generations include states in the deep South, including Texas and also Florida. So it's quite common for people in Texas to kind of, want to stay in Texas. And there's also a lot of like pride. There's kind of like a lot of like local pride. And interesting enough, regarding Chilean immigrants in Canada, I've actually in my thesis I actually talked about how the Chilean diaspora in Chile was actually a brief product of pressure from a lot of NGOs as well as churches to actually admit Chilean asylum seekers and refugees from the Pinochet regime. So I thought that was really interesting. It seems like it's kind of interesting to see kind of a product of that in a lot of Chilean friends in Canada that I have.
Right. Yeah, and it's funny. Like I just feel like such a naturalized Canadian sometimes. Like obviously I'm proud of my Chilean background, but I always forget. It's like, yeah, I guess I'm not. I'm a product of that dictatorship in some ways, right? And I integrated into Canada really really easily, and I speak the language fluently. I'm visibly different, but not culturally. I'm not very Chilean. So that's interesting. So I guess my question then, kind of talking about your studies a little bit, then is what drew you to political science? Because I understand you have a bachelor and a master's in political science now. Is that correct? And you're going towards a doctorate now, hey?
I have a bachelor's right now, and I have an associate's. However, I will have a master's. I will have a master's next month, hopefully, and then I will be pursuing a doctorate later. So what drew me to political science was kind of interesting because I was at a community college for the first 3 years of my academic career. And I've basically worked my way up. And it wasn't until like the last year of my community college that I determined my major. And it had a lot to do with the simple fact that I ran into it's because of the simple fact that I ran into a very interesting professor of mine who was a government professor. And he kind of encouraged me to go into the field. And I kind of been at that field and haven't looked back ever since. And one other thing that I really enjoy about political science is because I'm pretty big on history and I'm pretty big on politics, and I like studying sociology. And the political science is kind of a social science in which you can look into different humanities and social sciences at the same time, because almost everything has a level of politics and political science, even math even subjects such as math, biology, so that's kind of why I kind of was drawn to political science, because I'm very interested in a lot of topics, and political science kind of narrows all that stuff down.
Well, it's definitely no secret that politics influences every area of our lives, or every area of our lives. And specifically in Texas, I know the response to going on to the coronavirus now, I suppose, the response to the coronavirus is quite varied around the world. Like here in Saskatchewan, we're talking about reopening up the province now. We're doing that in May, and similarly to Texas, from what I understand, they're wanting to open up the state. The only difference is our cases are incredibly low compared to theirs. Like right now in Regina, there's something like 9 active cases here, and that's it in my city. That's active cases, of course. There's probably other people who are asymptomatic. So I guess I'm just curious from your perspective, what do you think about what's going on in Dallas right now with them wanting to kind of jump back into reopening things, or in Texas, I should say?
Well, it's important to understand the context of it's important to do a comparison to the United States and Canada before we go into details about, our thoughts. It's important to understand that the United States is smaller geographically than Canada. However, we and Quebec is like 3 times the size of Texas where I live. However, the United States has roughly 10 times as many people. And right now, the United States is at the is basically kind of the focal point, because previously it was China, then it was Italy, then it was Spain, and now it's us. We have nearly 1 million cases right now, and we just recently surpassed like 50,000 deaths.
I think by the time this podcast comes out, you probably will have 1 million cases because it's going to come out next week.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, like I almost guarantee it at this point.
Yeah, and also New York has like over 263,000 cases alone. And in Texas, where I live, we have nearly 30,000 cases. And basically, compared to Canada as a whole, y'all have somewhere around 45 to 50,000 cases. Yes. So like the top 3 U.S. states have more cases than Canada. And
totally.
And so with that being said, it's also important to know that I'm pretty sure Canada is in a similar situation. The United States is a federation, and we have like 50 different states and like hundreds of different municipalities and counties and districts. And each and every one of those, like each and every one of those levels of governments have varying different policies and very contradicting policies. And many of those policies aren't on the level of the scientific consensus. And I'm pretty sure we're more significantly it's kind of difficult to get everybody on the same page compared to, smaller countries such as Canada in terms of population, of course.
Right.
And with that.
Well, it's interesting actually you say that. I wanted to add something there because with Canada, and obviously, in the States, I think the impression we have here in Canada quite often is that, like it's every state is just so varied in its ideas and its policies and all those kinds of things. And, it's not quite as centralized as Canada would be with, we have like centralized healthcare. We have, there's something about being Canadian that's somewhat unifying. But having said that, like in recent years, we've had a lot more of that compartmentalization with people, especially with, in the West, we have the Wexit movement now where people want to separate from Canada in the West and that kind of thing. It's not like a super significant movement, but big enough to be noticed. So like comparing the two countries a little bit is really interesting that Canada seems to be, even though we're not at the States level in that way, we still do have our fragmentation, but interestingly enough, I've been finding the virus is almost changing that a little bit for us. So I'm curious, like Canada seems to be having some cultural shifts because of the virus, even just the way we're thinking about how we interact with each other, how we cooperate. Are you seeing anything like that in the States, or is it very much like this state believes this thing and this state is like, no, let's shelter in place?
Basically that. Like the second one is kind of the exact same cases because it's important to look like looking at the different policies, such as New York and California, for example. They were kind of the first to basically practice the quarantines and the lockdowns before March. However, it didn't take until the March surge, as I infamously call it, before my state, such as Texas and Florida, to kind of do it. However, it was kind of too late in our cases because we were having spring break at that time, so there was a lot more people were vulnerable to it.
Oh yes.
And right now, we're still having those issues because there's New York and California are more likely to extend their quarantines and their lockdowns. However, in May, states like Texas and Georgia are considering reopening. However, within those states, cities aren't following that policy because Dallas, we're extending our shelter in place until mid-May, and we'll most likely extend it. And also in Atlanta, despite what the Georgia governor saying one thing, while the Atlanta mayor is saying something entirely different. So
Right.
like there's not a so like compared to Canada, there's not like a unified consensus, and I think that is making us a lot more vulnerable in terms of the
Yes.
pandemic.
Oh, trust me. Yeah. Most of us here are sitting here watching you guys just terrified. Like, like our response has just been so different. And like, even just, whether you like Trudeau or not, it's not even important. It's just the way our leader has handled things compared to your leader is just so night and day. And it's just so bizarre. And,
Yeah,
like,
people
yeah,
are.
like, I don't even know sometimes like some of the things. I mean, recently with the whole injecting cleaner into your body kind of thing to cure
Oh
coronavirus, like
goodness.
we're just not even close to that range of politics here. So yeah, the
Yeah,
other interesting thing
recently.
I want.
Oh,
Sorry,
sorry.
I just wanted to mention about
Okay.
you're talking about the cities having a different response, and actually, here in Saskatchewan. Interestingly enough, our mayor in Regina really wanted to jump on social distancing measures really fast, and so he had a whole different set of rules compared to the provincial government, and they actually overrode him really fast. They were like, no, you can't do that. We're going to send the message for the province, and you don't get to decide what gets shut down and what doesn't. So we've had the exact opposite, where it's like the larger provincial government body came down and said, no, the city can't do what they want, which is super interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of harder to do that in the United States because there's
Hmm.
so many. Because I'm pretty sure that there's much more like municipalities to do that, and also there's been disputes between cities and also states in the United States. However, even under these circumstances, I think that it's going to be hard. Like it seems like centralization is becoming weaker in the United States, surprisingly,
Right.
despite it being more stronger in Canada. And recently, I would actually think regarding like Canada's universal healthcare system.
Hmm.
I honestly think that actually helps a lot because I know that in the United States we don't have a universal healthcare system, and between 30 to 50,000 Americans annually die because they can't afford basic healthcare, and oftentimes and I'm pretty sure there's always questions that you ask, like, before things got really this bad, like how many people how many people felt sick and wanted to go to the doctor, but they couldn't afford it? How many people how many people are being denied access to health care during this pandemic, as well as before the pandemic, in which that's making them more vulnerable to to COVID-19 and the coronavirus.
Yeah, I've heard some stories coming out of your country about people, being turned away at hospitals, or yeah, not having the right kind of insurance, so not really wanting to go to the hospital when they feel sick, and that kind of stuff. And yeah, it's interesting you brought that up. I've been following very closely in what's going on in your country, and I really feel for some of the people out there who just don't their states don't have the preparation that they need, and then people are fighting over things, and it's just so bizarre. Like we're not having that response here. We're not like we don't have one province going collecting all these supplies because they praised our leader, and then the other one not getting them, and that's not nothing like that's happening here. Like we're
Oh
taking
yeah.
care of each other. We're getting through this together. It's very different, a very different reaction.
That's interesting because like you talked about how so like y'all don't have the situation where your hospitals are like super overwhelmed, like
for
given
the for
what
the
you
most part. For the most part, but I think Ontario might have some issues. But anyway, yeah. Go on.
in the United States, it's like the exact opposite because like our hospitals are extremely overwhelmed, especially in hotspots such as New York and California, and also due to what you said regarding the supplies. Like just recently, the U.S. introduced the U.S. government introduced what we call the Defensive Protection Act of 1950s, which basically
Right.
requires companies to basically create things in terms of national emergencies and war efforts. And basically this was done because we were simply running out of ventilators and masks. And the situation was so bad that doctors and nurses were resorting to wearing trash bags and Halloween costumes and
Oh
Halloween
God.
masks
Oh,
because they
that's
simply
horrifying.
lacked basic supplies that were needed. And now we have this. but now we're trying to create these ventilators. However, we're also blocking ventilators to go to other places, such as, for example, recently with the M3 controversy with the U.S. government blocking, masks going to Canada.
Yep.
So that's a big issue. However, not a lot of, but yeah, we still running out of masks. So it's kind of like the U.S. healthcare system is in complete shambles. It always had its issues, but now, given this pandemic, you see like the absolute shambles that the U.S. healthcare system is in right now.
Oh, totally. And again, like I don't want to. I'm not not super knowledgeable about all the different dynamics of what goes on in the States in their healthcare, but I guess just watching the numbers arise by itself is kind of the main thing. Like right off the bat, we're like, holy cow! Like it's just happening so fast down there, And for a country that didn't have it, only a few months ago, or have the virus there, it's now, like you say, they're the epicenter of everything. So yeah, things have, obviously they were not prepared. Obviously, there wasn't a unified response that helped them mitigate that. So, anyway, yeah, I could probably talk about that all day because I'm really fascinated by what the Americans are doing in terms of healthcare and their response to the virus. But I want to move a little bit away from that and talk a little bit about your studies and going to school, because obviously, as you said, you just got accepted into get your doctorate, and now we're still in a pandemic. We're still shut down. I guess you haven't finished your master's yet. So what's kind of going on with you in schooling through all of this?
Well, this is actually going really well. So right now I'm just wrapping up my assignments, and I just have one more assignment to complete before I receive my master's. And I've just recently, and my thesis is actually under review, which is basically a comparative case study analysis regarding the niqab debate in Canada and France.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Yeah, tell me.
Oh yeah, so basically I was like, my thesis is a comparative analysis in regards to basically like seeing what the level of integration among Muslims within a society that either bans the niqab or doesn't ban the niqab. And basically I chose two countries. One of them is Canada, which doesn't ban the niqab, which doesn't ban it on a federal level. Yes. And I did France, which is banned it on a national level. And I basically did a comparison, a contradiction into basically what works for one country and what doesn't work for one country in regards to making Muslims feel welcomed inside those societies. And I found some really interesting analysis, some very interesting findings. And basically I've looked at other things such as, attitudes towards immigration, attitudes towards Islam, attitudes towards, such as, how do Muslims feel in regards to like being likely to be discriminated against, etc. So it's a lot more complex than just the niqab debate in itself.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, that's just kind of a manifestation of all the other things, right? And as someone who lives here, and I'm technically a visible minority, I've experienced racism in my own way. I get mistaken for First Nations most of the time, is what typically happens, and so I experience the same racism that First Nations people do in public sometimes. But having said all that, I know the experience here can be very difficult for immigrants and people of other cultures. Sometimes it's great though too, depending on the community you're in, and I don't know, I've been to Toronto, and I feel like the attitude there is so diverse. With you just see people from all over the world all the time, and you kind of just get used to it, right? But yeah, so did you I guess with the niqab debate? I'm just curious now. I don't want to venture off too far into the weeds here, but what did you find in terms of similarities? Because I know here, I think it was just in Quebec that they were going to ban it, or they did ban it. And then, they banned it during citizenship, I should say, during citizenship ceremonies or something along those lines. Don't quote me on that. But in France, is it just you can't use the niqab in any official documentation, or what's going on there? I guess maybe tell me a bit about that.
So in France, there was a particular law that was passed in roughly either 2010 to 11, which was basically states that you couldn't wear anything that obscures the face in the public sphere. And
okay.
and basically it was intentionally done to ban the niqab. However, it expanded to other things, such as, for example, you couldn't wear like a do-rag. You couldn't wear like anything that covered your face, even a mask in certain cases.
Right.
But they tried to make the law very general and to not be specifically against the niqab to avoid the whole calls for discrimination. And regarding the citizenship situation, that was actually a recommendation by the Vice Prime Minister Stephen Harper at the time, in which he would recommend individuals to unveil or remove any face covering while taking a ceremonial oath of citizenship. And also, it's important to note that there's a difference between the legal oath of citizenship and the ceremonial oath of citizenship. The legal one is the official one, while the ceremonial one is much more of a ceremonial position. And the legal one you can do by yourself, which was what Huanchaco wanted to do, was like more than willing to do. Right. Even to the point where she said that she would unveil under the circumstances, so long as the person giving the oath is a woman. However, she refused to do it under the ceremonial public situation, and that's that particular court case. But overall, another finding that I found is that given Canada's stance, like as you said, as a multicultural society, with like Toronto and Vancouver and Montreal, I've noticed that, like, given that aspect, like how it makes Canadian nationalism a lot more inclusive than French nationalism. And that within itself helps like Muslims as well as other religious and cultural minorities feel more welcomed in Canada compared to France, because I found a poll that said that Muslims are actually more likely than non-Muslims to be proud to be Canadian. However, Muslims in France are less likely to feel like they're French compared to non-Muslims in France.
Well, that's super interesting. Yeah. And I mean, obviously we have our regional differences here in terms of, you'll find some views in certain areas of Canada that are different than others. Obviously you're going to find anomalies anywhere you go, but yeah. But I think generally speaking, I think you're right that we're relatively welcoming to immigrants here. I mean, like I say, I've had my own experiences, my personal experiences, but those are mostly anecdotal and not the representative of the larger picture here. Well, that's super interesting stuff. Yeah, I guess I misspoke a bit because I was thinking like in Quebec. Now I remember what they banned. They banned religious symbols in for their government workers. That's what it was, right? That's yes. So yes, it wasn't that they banned the niqab, but I guess they would have banned the niqab along with, like, you couldn't wear certain jewelry or whatever, right? You couldn't have a religious item showing or something as a public worker. Was that what it was, as a public servant?
So basically, it was saying that, like, if an individual was in a public service in a position of authority, that they wouldn't be able to wear like an overtly religious symbol. And this includes like a niqab, a hijab, a turban, or a large cross, or a kapal, or a yarmulke. And this included people like police officers and lawyers, and also doctors, as well as judges, for example. And interesting enough, there's actually been situations in which individuals have actually left the province. Like, for example, there was a Sikh woman that I've written about that actually left the province of Quebec to basically seek employment opportunities in BC. So, and also I've noticed that a lot of provinces and municipal governments has actually condemned Quebec's actions in this regard.
Yeah, I definitely. I don't think people were. They didn't have the support of Canada as a whole, for sure. But I'd say the majority were against some of those views. It's kind of the opposite here, actually, in Saskatchewan. Sometimes, like, they haven't even removed prayer from the legislative, or even in schools. Technically, you're allowed to have public prayer. Like, there's been some incidents with that here. So it's kind of the opposite here, where we're actually like okay with religion being a part of some of our stuff. That's a whole nother debate, and I don't want to get into that today. But but Yeah, let's move back on. Oh no, I'm super fascinated about your thesis though too. So like, I mean, that's
Okay.
I almost think like I need to have you on for a separate podcast just to talk about that stuff because I could talk about that all day. Um, but yeah, so I'm just still curious about your studies a little bit in terms of like I guess what kind of challenges do you think you're going to face here going forward now, trying to continue on with your education? I imagine defending your thesis even will have to be done remotely, right? Like, or will you have to go in person before people? Like, what's kind of what happens for you, I guess, going forward?
So I believe that from what I've heard, my thesis right now is under review, and I should hear back from my advisor by next week at the latest. And they haven't specifically told me about like whether or not I'm going to they haven't I haven't been hearing much about it yet. However, I'm most likely going to defend it remotely. And also I've been working on it for quite some time, so I'm looking forward to defending it. And I can talk about that all day. But I guess one other challenge I have is that, doing things, and also I'm also a teaching assistant as well. So I
Right.
teach government courses like for incoming freshman students. And that has been kind of a challenge because it's kind of like I hate doing online classes, and I hate giving them even more because it's just like it's just it. I guess I'm very introverted. However, I do understand the importance of interdependence and having a personal connection with
Right.
individuals. So, and I can't do, and there's a lot of stuff that I can't do. Like I can't teach people primarily over an email, for example. So
Right.
I kind of feel like I'm not mastering the ability to properly accommodate the students. However, from what the students told me, they've been more than happy. I had the best students in this situation because they've been really awesome. They've been really compassionate and very caring and very supportive of of the situation that the school's in, and they're doing
Right.
really well academically as well. So
Hmm.
it seems like things are going well despite the adversities that we're going through. And I've even and also one other thing I wanted to kind of chime you in on is like the process of applying during this pandemic, because normally while I was applying for a PhD position, like normally you'll hear back from them around roughly 1 to 2 weeks about their decision. However, it took nearly a month for
Okay.
for me to hear about about my decision regarding UNT and other universities and stuff like that. So it feels weird. And also there's situations where I contact like advisors as well as directors and professors. And normally they have office hours. So if you like email them in like at early in the morning, you'll most likely hear back from them like roughly at noon or the afternoon. And if you hear from them, then if you email them like later in the afternoon, you'll hear back from them like next morning. However,
Hmm.
I emailed the director. I emailed one director at maybe 8 o'clock in the morning, and I haven't heard back from them until midnight. So, like, they're working from home and whatnot, and it feels weird in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, like I mean, obviously, this technology helps us
Oh yeah, definitely.
continue on, but yeah, for sure. Like I imagine I think even just like I'm thinking of my own work life, just trying to adjust my process to match this new world, and I mean, my work life is all about matching people. Like I'm a social worker by day, and I match people up in mentorship relationships, and even that, like, that kind of process is so bizarre now because it's like, well, let's get people meeting and doing things, but not in person, like just on a computer, through phones, all that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, I can imagine like the same in the education field. It's like, geez, how do we deliver this? How do we keep these processes going and all these things? So it's actually quite remarkable, I think, that you can continue your studies. And like you say, that students are still excelling in this kind of environment, because it's not even the process changing. It's also the stresses of what's happening, right?
Oh yeah.
like, oh, I got to stay home all day now, and I don't get to go see people I like seeing, or I don't. I mean, am I going to get the virus and get sick? All these kinds of things. So, how do you find you're managing that in terms of trying to keep focused on what you're doing? I know you said you were a bit of an introvert, so maybe it's easier for you, but like, how do you manage, the stuff that's going outside your door versus, I need to study, I need to keep these degrees moving on.
So basically, like, I guess like a lot of my work has been relatively good. It's just having, like, basically, since I'm an introvert, like, mostly, like, so basically this lockdown is kind of like a de facto long weekend. Like, I spend most of my weekend at home and, and basically like enjoying my alone time. So this kind of feels like a de facto long weekend. So oftentimes like the big issue that I have is kind of like making sure I have the right energy to basically continue my stuff, continue doing stuff, and making sure that I'm like having things ready. And also other situations is that, I regularly keep in contact with friends and family members, as well as my class, as well as my students, and making sure that, they're able to, that they have like proper resources that they need. Because I know that one of my students actually have a relative that actually that's in contact that tested positive for the virus. So I had to make arrangements for that individual to make sure that they are able to basically be properly accommodated, such as having like extensions on like assignments, so they can properly care for their loved ones. Mm-hmm. And also I've been trying to basically, given the fact that I'm in my house all day, and I'm basically trying to make sure that I'm staying active as well. Not like just sitting at a computer and just grading papers and also tests, and also, just doing homework all day. I want to make sure that I've done that. However, I wanted to make sure that I don't only just, do that and go to sleep or eat and whatnot. I just want to make sure that I'm able to also, watch a decent film, or, do some more independent research, and also do some exercises, and also get out at a perfect time where absolutely nobody else is out and stuff like that.
Right. No, that's so important. I think I'm thinking about my own life here right now, and I mean, I'm in front of a screen so often. We're in front of a screen right now, and I'm in front of a computer, I'm in front of a phone, I'm in front of a gaming system, whatever it is, all the time, it seems, and that's like been the hardest part, I find, is that trying to like step away from all that and just do something different, and just going outside. Because right now my work is all, again, like in a computer. My hobbies are all on a computer. My social time is all on a computer. All of it, right? And it's just so important for us to do something else to balance that out. And I looked at my steps today on my like Apple Health app or whatever, and my average for the month is so much lower than it was before. I hadn't even thought about that. And I'm like, yeah, like, because I'm not moving around very much. I'm sitting down for long periods of time. My back is killing me. Like, there's lots of issues. So yeah, it's really cool to hear that you're really thinking about, geez, all these other things I need to do, and really, to keep our minds fresh and active, we need to be doing things like that to exercise, to get fresh air, all these things, right? So, or just to numb it away from stress too, right? Like, I don't need to sit and read the news all day and learn everything about coronavirus all day, every day. Yeah, that kind of thing. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just also referring to, and also it's important. And also, I think one other thing that we should make reference in regards to social distancing, like, even though you can't basically hug somebody, you can always Skype somebody. So yes. Like, don't hug nobody, so like make sure that you, even under these circumstances, make sure that you're able to communicate with other people and reach out to other people virtually, because we are in a very good time. This is probably one of the better times to practice social distancing compared to, medieval times or some medieval times and things like that, because we have the ability to connect with people in ways that were physically impossible because, like, for example, the bubonic plague, given like the bubonic plague, for example, when somebody was, distancing from other people, they literally were in a room by themselves. And like maybe they could have Skyped somebody, but they couldn't like Skype nobody, for example. So, that person probably got lonesome and also became more vulnerable to illnesses. So like, good health, good mental and physical health. That includes like, social, that includes, talking to people virtually can help in terms of being prepared for and also treating illnesses.
Totally. Speaking of that social component you're talking about, I find that every time I'm in front of a computer talking to somebody like this, I always feel better after, to be honest. I feel like I forget how much I need to just talk to people outside of my family circle, as much as I love my family, you can only talk so much, you run out of things to talk about. You're not really stimulated as much. So that's super important. So I don't want to take up all of your time here. Like I feel like we almost need to just chat for a couple hours and have 2 different episodes. I have so many things to even continue asking you, but I just want to move on to some fun stuff here, just so we can kind of lighten the mood a little bit. And I know we've talked about some serious topics. So some of my guests, what I'm doing is I'm doing something called the preparedness scale for the pandemic. And it's kind of a joke. It's not really anything scientific. I mean, I'm a social worker. I'm in social sciences, but this is just kind of curious to see what people are thinking. So, or for me, curious to see what people are thinking, I should say. So anyways, I just have a few questions for you. These are just basic things about living in a pandemic. So masks or no masks? Do you wear masks?
Yes. However, like it's kind of like a 1 out of 3 times I do it.
Okay.
Because like we're running out of masks in the United States, so it's kind of hard to get them.
Yeah, I purchased a cloth mask, and obviously it's not going to protect me so much. It's more just to not shoot my germs out everywhere every day, right? So, but we don't have 100% compliance here, so it's not really useful unless most people are wearing masks, right? So, what about like personal hygiene stuff? Like, if you found that you just I could speak for myself, it's like I don't really care about deodorant right now. I don't care about shaving that much, even though I'm shaved. Have you found that there's been any changes in kind of like what you do in a day that way, or are you keeping to your routine?
I think I'm keeping my routine pretty well, and also proper hygiene actually does a lot in terms of like preparing for situations like this, because like the reason why the bubonic plague, for example, spread so much was because there was a lack of like hygienic standards weren't as up to par as what they are now, and also sanitation mechanisms such as like drains and whatnot weren't there at the time. So like a lot of things, you can achieve quite a bit of things by keeping up to date with personal hygiene. This includes bathing, washing your hands, and also making sure you're touching your face as little as possible, and also being in good health and eating well-balanced diets. Like that can help a lot with your physical and mental health.
Totally. I think even like I know this virus is not, it doesn't really discriminate too much. I mean, there's once in a while, I shouldn't say that. I mean, based on what we're looking at, it seems like there's certain populations that are more at risk, but having said all that, if you're healthier, you have a better chance of getting through it, right? Not having as many symptoms. I know the older we get, sometimes just our immune system just isn't up to it anymore, right? So, pants or no pants? What kind of clothes do you wear during apocalypse? Is it the same?
I wear pants because I am completely insecure about my legs.
Oh, okay, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, nobody's seeing them though, right? You don't know if I'm wearing pants right now, right? It's under.
I'm still quite insecure. Like I wouldn't even wear shorts most of the time. So like I'm more of like a jeans and slacks type of person. Like I'll even wear that even if I'm in the house all day. Like I tend to be pretty insecure about my body, including especially my legs.
Well, so it sounds like, I mean, for the most part, just like in terms of your personal care and clothing and all that. It's very much hasn't changed due to the pandemic, right? Like I and it's funny. Like my wife jokes here that it's like, oh, she's like, I can guarantee you that there's no women wearing bras out there right now. She's like, she says like the only reason why we do it is because you go out in public and you feel like you have to, and but so it's interesting to hear that you're kind of maintaining the same routines. I personally I have struggled a little bit through this pandemic to kind of like really care about some of those things. I mean, I do get cleaned up and shaved for the podcast, but I definitely I find myself just like, whatever, nobody's gonna be in my space today. I'm just like, but it almost helps you to keep productive, to like stay in those routines, right? Like that's what I'm finding anyway when I do it. Anyways, streaming service of choice. Do you have any recommendations for stuff on streams?
Are you referring to like Netflix and Hulu and things like that?
Yeah, all that stuff. Yeah, you got different options down there. We don't have Hulu up here. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I would say I've watched some stuff on Disney Plus. Okay. And also there's one soccer, nice. There's like reruns from like the CPL that I've watched. I'm a pretty big soccer fan and a pretty big Canadian soccer fan. So One Soccer Plus helps a lot. And that's also I've watched a lot of YouTube videos and whatnot. So I would say One Soccer Plus, Disney Plus, as well as YouTube. Those are my three streaming preferences.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying as a soccer fan. I mean, obviously that's one of the reasons why we know each other, is because we're both Toronto FC fans. I've been really enjoying the whole match of the week thing that they're doing, and they keep they're showing all these old classic games, which is funny to say. There's so many classic games now, considering how young that team is.
Yeah,
but we had so much success in the last few years that it's just there's so many great memories now. So I've been enjoying watching some of those things, even if there's no actual like new sports. What's your favorite music to listen to during this whole thing?
R&B and nice. R&B, nightcore, and dubstep.
Oh, cool!
And
cool.
Overall, I'll listen to anything with a decent beat. But
nice,
R&B is kind of like my go-to music.
Well, R&B has like it's so involved in the pop industry now too, right? There's so many R&B elements that are moving into like all these mainstream songs, and it's amazing how much it's had an influence.
Yeah, especially in the United States, like R&B has kind of becoming the more mainstream music in the United States.
Yeah,
and that's kind of interesting to say the least. Yeah. Despite it being considered more of a lower class music, because oftentimes you have situations where like rock, jazz, blues, as well as R&B and hip hop. Like oftentimes, like during their origin, they tended to be kind of like lower class, predominantly African American type of music, and it was looked down upon among modern society. However, eventually, over time, it's basically became mainstream American culture now, which is kind of fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, oh man, I'm such a big music guy. Like I love talking about genres, and I can totally relate to how like some of the music from poorer communities in the States has been co-opted almost by larger companies into becoming like something they can sell and something they can distribute, and like the whole idea of the manufactured gangster rapper thing, where it's like this person is just a product that they created, or else they take somebody who actually is a gangster rapper and they exploit them and make money off them, kind of thing. It's almost cliche now that's what happens. Hugs or no hugs? Are you a hugger? Are you waiting for hugs when this is over?
Not really. I'm not. Okay. Honestly, like I live in Texas, and we're pretty. And given like the United States is kind of like between, like we have like the southern part of the U.S. has a very Latin American influences, so physical contact tends to be very popular here. Yeah. However, I'm not much of a physical contact person. And people in the northern part of the United States aren't necessarily super duper physical contacty. So it's kind of weird. It's kind of weird from an American perspective, because half the country is super into hugs, while the other half of the country is kind of like, I need my space.
You're right. It's all that Latino influence. No, I know what you're talking about. You go to South America, like in Chile, and it's almost rude not to like sit beside somebody on the bus or not to interact with everybody, right? And you meet strangers and you're giving them hugs and kisses. We're not very well set up to protect ourselves during a pandemic. That's the thing, right? Because we're so close to each other.
It's the exact situation in Texas in a way, because there's a Southern hospitality culture in Texas where people have where people would like go out their way to have conversations with individuals. However, in places like New York and California, it's kind of like, it's considered kind of rude to basically, and it's kind of considered intrusive to do something, to do that in that state. However, in Texas, it's kind of rude to not say hi to somebody and to not sit next to somebody. So it's kind of so the United States is a really interesting country in that respect. We're kind of like an intersection because like we kind of like our culture is very influenced by Latin America, and we're also influenced by European and indigenous culture as well as African culture. So like, the standards of like etiquettes, and so the standards of social etiquette, it is very different depending on which state or which city, for that matter, you're from.
Right. Yeah, I mean, even in Canada, you'll find lots of those cultural variances by our regions and immigration of different people in different areas and that kind of thing. So we both live in very, very diverse countries for sure when it comes to customs like that, right? So last question with this little scale thingy. What's your pro tip for survival?
My pro tip for survival is enjoy yourself and do not panic. Mm-hmm. So basically, like, and also refer to the U.S. diversity. I wanted to give a shout out to the Asian American community in the United States, because they play a very important role in terms of like socialization mechanisms. So sorry about that. But with that being, regarding back to that particular question, I would say, keep calm and carry on, and basically just enjoy the time that you have just enjoy the time that you have to yourself, to your loved ones, and to your family, to your loved ones, whether they be friends and family members, as well as kind of just basically keep yourself in good health. Make sure that you're like knowing your information and not injecting yourself with cleaning materials, and not drinking like fish aquarium cleaner and whatnot. So, listen to scientists and listen to experts, and don't listen to doomsday scenarios, or don't listen. And sadly, I have to say this: don't listen to the president don't listen to certain leaders, such as our president of the the president of the United States that we have right now. So, I would say just, enjoy yourself and enjoy the precious time that you have with loved ones as well as yourself. And also make sure that you're listening to experts and not basically worrying yourself, because like the more worried you are, the more vulnerable your health is.
Right. No, it's geez, some of the medical advice that's been coming out of your country, I don't even know. I'm hoping that it's not having a huge impact on the general population in terms of what they decide to do, but I'm sure there's a few cases out there of
one person actually died drinking that fish aquarium cleaning stuff. And also one other situation that we have is that, like recently there's been like a huge increase in protests in the United States. Regarding the lockdowns. Like a lot of people are protesting the lockdowns. And unfortunately, these individuals are vulnerable because, in many of these protests, they're not practicing social distancing. And there's more than like 10 people going to these protests.
Yes.
And there's also counter protests with like doctors and nurses and medical professions who are also becoming vulnerable. And this is unfortunate because there was recently a 50-year-old individual that was attending this protest who tragically passed away due to COVID-19. And a lot of the reasons, a lot of these protests are influenced by certain aspects of paranoia from the public. And a lot of it is being encouraged by outside groups, and also like far right leaning groups as well. So and also they're kind of spread, and a lot of these groups tend to spread false information, and that is kind of making people, that's kind of feeding into certain paranoias that individuals have.
Yes.
And
yes.
And given the fact that the social safety nets in the U.S. aren't as strong as they are in Canada or Europe per se, a lot of people are hurting really badly here, and many people are losing their jobs and are risking being evicted from their houses and apartments and whatnot. So a lot of people are struggling, and they really, really want to have a sense of power. They really want to have their livelihoods back, and they really want to go back to work. We've recently had like a massive unemployment spike, and like these jobs, and also a lot of people were laid off with no benefits, and the only thing that they have is like that $1,000 stimulus, which can barely afford groceries.
That's like a one-time payment too, right? You're not getting that. Yeah.
And they've thought about encouraging to do it for like per 3 months, but at that point, that can barely afford a month of groceries in many parts of the United States. So a lot of times a lot of people are upset, and they are hurting, and they go to these protests, and they become more vulnerable to the pandemic.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because one of the things I'm always thinking about when I see these protests, I mean, as much as people shake their heads and everything, and I feel like obviously they have a valid concern, right? Like some of these people are really wondering, how am I going to eat? Or I want to work, I want to make money. I need to get out there and keep living my life. And it's just, we're just not used to experiencing things like this in our society, especially in Canada and the States. I kind of joked with my last guests about South America, how in Chile, we're like used to like martial law just suddenly happening and like having to like lock yourself in a house for a while. Like it just happens so many times, but it's in our countries here, we're just not, we're not used to that being a reality, even for a little while, and we're talking now, this might have to be off and on for a year or a year and a half, or like, who knows, right? So I guess we're going to find out soon in my province here about once we relax our social distancing measures here, we'll see how well that turns out for us.
Unfortunately, we're going to learn that about our state in Texas because we're doing that as well. Because like the lieutenant governor said, we got to save the economy, even though it means losing grandma.
I saw that. Yeah. I was reading that this morning, and I was looking up stuff about Texas, and I was like, oh my God, like this is, we're just not having these kinds of discussions here really, at least not in a larger political forum, like our leaders here in Canada. I'm so grateful of how level-headed they've been through this whole thing.
And also I would like to add another, I apologize for going on, but I have to add just one other situation. Like, also, it's important to not regarding the last question. It's also important to not, to basically be informed and not understand, to not, listen to the paranoia, because oftentimes, and I talked about how this is making people vulnerable to the pandemic. It's also in the United States in particular. I know it's if you have similar situations in Canada, but not as common as it is here. Like, we have a very massive issue with a rapid increase in like xenophobic hate crimes which is like anti-Chinese hate crimes against Asians and Asian Americans where we live. Recently, there's been situations in which individuals have been there's been like literal attempted murders, as well as like vandalisms and like assaults, because somebody was sprayed with Febreze not too long ago. And this is kind of reminding me of the situation of the Ebola epidemic in 2004, which there was a lot of animosity against African Americans as well as Black people, such as myself, because I remember the situation during this pandemic when my allergies were acting up at one time. When I sneezed, I remember the kid next to me just literally took off running and crying.
Oh, gosh.
So it's kind of like that. So like I would argue that like those, like it's always important to listen to experts and not buy into the paranoia because that's also because like as you can see, this paranoia that people are listening to, like people are literally getting sick and literally dying because of the lack of information, because of the misinformation that they're having. And I hope that it's not as bad as in Canada. So
I don't think as a whole,
really bad here.
I'm speaking anecdotally, of course, but I mean, just based on what I'm seeing in media and people I'm talking to and things, I feel like we're not having as many issues with people buying into misinformation and things like that. I mean, yeah, I know there's some conspiracy theorists around here and there talking about, where did this virus, what lab did this virus come from, and all these things like that. Yeah, I mean, that to me right now, it's just all about managing impacts and hopefully the average person is figuring that out here in Canada. I think they are. I think, people are taking it seriously enough to stay inside for the most part, and people are worried about their elderly parents or the grandparents or whoever. People have some concern here for each other, I think. So again, you can't speak for everybody, but I think as a whole, I think Canada is responding very admirably to the crisis. But
yeah. And I hope that you learn. I hope that you really hope that you learn from the mistakes that we're making in the United States, because like during in early March and late February, like given how this pandemic, given how the pandemic is working and is like has done, and given what China, Italy, and Spain went through during this pandemic, the United States had opportunities to learn and also to basically properly prepare themselves. However, we failed to do it, and unfortunately, it's showing that. And I really hope that other countries could learn from the United States in terms of like properly preparing for it, especially in regards to getting everybody on board and having a specific plan in place in order to basically make sure that everybody knows what to do and what's going on, and listen to the experts in this regard and not spread false information.
Totally. Yeah. I feel that in Canada, our politicians at the very least are listening to their medical officials quite a bit. I know in my province, you see them come out for a press conference every day almost, and it's the premier and the chief medical officer, and yeah, like he's running the show. That guy, like he's the medical officials are giving them information, and they're designing policy around that. So and it's been very effective in Canada for the most part. So hopefully people can also learn from those kinds of examples too, and we're always looking here. I think we're always looking at other countries too to see how they're managing. Like we're referencing South Korea or Singapore or other places and seeing, well, how are they, when they reopened, what happened, and what can we do differently or do the same, and that kind of stuff. So let's share that data. Let's figure out how to respond to this the best we can. Right. So
definitely.
Well, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I will say I'll grade you on your little thing here. I'll give you an A+. I give everybody an A+ anyway, but it's not a real test. But it seems like now you've really thought through, what you're doing through this whole pandemic and adjusting what you need to, and I love the fact that you're keeping your routines intact. You're still pursuing your education. Like it's such a hard thing to do, and I love that you're finding ways to do that. So, I'll ask you one last question here. This is always my parting question, but do you have a message for yourself or something in the future that, something you want to look back on later when this is all over?
I am going to look back on this and say that, I guess as an introvert, I kind of basically took advantage of choice, because even though I normally spend most of my time inside and basically only have like a close-knit group of friends, and we just hang out at the house and do things. However, I kind of took advantage of having the option to choose to stay inside or go outside and, go to like a fancy restaurant, or like go to like a museum, or go to a soccer game.
Come visit Canada, right?
Yeah, come visit Canada because like I've actually planned to take a summer vacation in Canada this year,
right?
And that's I'm expecting to reschedule that for next year.
Right.
But like I just took advantage. I kind of took advantage of those choices, and I took advantage of the fact that I can like watch a soccer game every single weekend, and now my soccer options are just limited to reruns and analysis and things. Like I guess like one thing that I've learned from this is that basically looking back at this, I'm going to be quite a bit more I'm going to look at certain appreciations of having the choice to do things. And I'm going to kind of be in a situation where I'm hoping to basically do more things outside and basically when I ever have the opportunity to do something out of the ordinary, I'm going to be more likely to do it. A great example of this includes, not only like rescheduling my trip to Canada, I'm hoping to visit Chile like later down the year, like either next year or the year after next.
Right. I'm hoping this is all over, but I'm also hoping, Chile has been going through some social issues, obviously, recently with their mass protests and all those kinds of things. I'm hoping that we come out of this with them finding some solutions to that too. So it could also be a long time before Chile is stable, not just because of coronavirus.
Referendum coming up as well. Like I think they'll have to reschedule that because of COVID-19.
Totally. Yeah. No, they will. Well, cool, Jefferson. I guess before I go, are you going to be publishing your thesis anywhere, or are people going to be able to check it out in the future?
I'm after I graduate, I'm hoping to actually find a publisher to actually publish that as a novel. So nice. I'm definitely gonna like let you know about that and keep you up to date on that.
Yeah, please do.
I think that's going to be really interesting. Now, so yeah, I think that's going to be. I'm hoping to actually have that as a published journal or a published book. So.
That's great. Yeah, please do let us know because I'll definitely pump that later in the future. And as a social worker, I'm super curious about that research. Well, thanks for coming by, Jefferson. Thanks for coming on, and thanks for giving us the your Texas perspective and your political science perspective. They're very valuable. It's a totally different world down there compared to other places, and like every place I interview, it seems you find new truths out and new ideas that you just didn't really understand were happening. So hopefully my listeners will gain a lot from what we've talked about.
Well, thank you so much, and I really appreciate what you're doing here. And I think that this is actually a very, very very, very fantastic podcast and a very useful podcast because I think that given these circumstances, I think that your podcast provides people a great sense of security as well as a great sense of comfort in terms of like letting the people know that they're not alone and that other people are also going through similar challenges and that there's the sense that there is hope and there is optimism in which basically people know, in which I think that these stories that you're presenting to the public is very important to basically give people a rallying cry as to basically hang in there and continue to do what you can. And like, there's going to be a better tomorrow.
Awesome. I appreciate that. I really do appreciate that. I started this podcast not entirely sure what my focus was, besides just get your mind off things, and I found it therapeutic to talk to people. But I think I totally agree with you that I really like this as an avenue for people to share their stories and to learn from that and to have some optimism. I really wanted to do something that wasn't just news or wasn't just debates or things like that. I really wanted it to just be about people's stories and how people are thriving through this and how they're struggling and all those kinds of issues. So thank you so much for saying that. That means a lot.
Oh, thank you.
Well, Jefferson, I'm going to let you go here. We're going to hit stop. We'll probably talk a little bit after here, but thank you so much for coming on again, and good luck with your PhD coming up and with everything going on in Dallas. We wish you luck in Canada. We hope you guys are safe and healthy.
Well, thank you so much. You have a good day.
Thanks for checking out the Pandemic People podcast. If you're on YouTube, please feel free to like and subscribe. If you're listening on a podcasting app, I hope you follow me on there. Every Saturday at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time, we're releasing new episodes. If you'd like to reach out and provide some feedback, maybe you have some suggestions about the show, please email info@pandemicpeople.ca. Again, that's info@pandemicpeople.ca. Hope to see you next week. Remember, we are all pandemic people.